Bill Doherty was born on February 23, 1902, to Michael and Catherine Doherty. The family of 5 boys and 1 girl were originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, but at the time of his birth, they were living in Glendale, Ohio, while Bill's father was a foreman of railroad workers. The family moved back to Cincinnati not long after his birth, and Bill began attending school at the Blessed Sacrament School on Wilder Avenue in Price Hill, which he attended until the 7th grade, when he had to drop out to get a job due to financial problems at home. His mother lied about his age so that he could get a work permit at the age of 13 instead of being 15 as the law required. Bill's first job in 1915 was as a telegraph messenger for the Postal Telegraph Company, and believing that his future lay in the telegraph industry, he began attending the Cincinnati School of Telegraphy in his spare time, graduating at the age of 16. Upon graduation, he was appointed as a manager for the Postal Telegraph Company, working at their locations at Harrison and Spring Grove Avenues and at 2nd and Walnut Streets in downtown Cincinnati. Having been raised in a strong union household, Bill joined the Commercial Telegraphers Union of America during his tenure with the Postal Telegraph Company. And when the CTUA went on strike in June of 1919, Bill did not hesitate to join the picket lines, even though it meant that he would once again be a financial burden upon his parents. This strike was doomed to fail because only the telegraph workers from the Postal Telegraph Company and the Order of Railroad Telegraphers walked out, and in less than a month the strike would end. Bill was not there to see the end of the strike, because at the end of June in 1919 he enlisted in the U.S. Army and reported for duty at the Presidio in San Francisco, California, with the 53rd Telegraph Battalion in the U.S. Army Signal Corps. Bill would serve during one of the most highly classified operations in U.S. history, the U.S. military intervention during the Bolshevik Revolution. During this operation, U.S. military forces supported anti-communist forces in the area around Vladivostok, Russia, and Siberia. Communist forces were eventually successful, and Bill, along with the rest of the U.S. military, was ordered out of the new Soviet Union. He left Siberia in the spring of 1920 aboard the U.S. Army transport, the South Bend, for the Philippines. Bill would spend 2 years stationed at Corregidor in the Philippines as a chief radio operator before being discharged and returning home to Cincinnati. Bill was excited to get back to his hometown of Cincinnati because he was anxious to renew his relationship with a special woman who he met in 1919 during his days as a telegraph operator, future wife Gertrude Dacey. The two would eventually marry on February 23, 1925, at St. Matthew's Church in Norwood, Ohio. Returning home for Bill was bittersweet, because even though he had found happiness with Gertrude, he had trouble finding a job, because he found that he had been blacklisted for participating in the failed strike of 1919, so he was not able to get his old job back with the Postal Telegraph Company. He ended up taking a job as an apprentice with the Huenfeld Stove Company before he was finally able to land a job in his chosen profession with the Western Union Telegraph Company. Bill worked at the old Pennsylvania Railroad station in Cincinnati for about 8 months until finally taking and passing the civil service examination. Bill began his career with the post office in January of 1923. He worked at the Cincinnati Main Post Office on the north side of 5th Street between Walnut and Main Streets. He started out as a substitute letter carrier, making 60 cents per hour. Bill joined Branch 43 as soon as he started working, and immediately became involved in the branch. He ran unsuccessfully for the position of local clerk for the Sick Benefit Association in 1924, 25, and 26. He also ran for branch president in 1927, losing to Raymond Bryson in a landslide defeat. Later in 1927, he was appointed to fill the vacant financial secretary position, and in 1928 he ran for branch president unopposed. In 1932, Bill was elected as president of the Ohio State Association of Letter Carriers. However, he only held that post for a short period of time when he was named to the board of directors of the National Sick Benefit Association upon the death of Branch 43 member John Mugavin late in 1932. Bill later served as president of the National Sick Benefit Association, the same office held by John Mugavin for many years, and in 1936 he was named to the executive board of the NALC. In 1939, delegates to the National Convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, proposed Resolution 70 that would prohibit any national officer from standing for re-election after they reached the age of 65, and the effect of this resolution would be that longtime National President Edward Gaynor would not be able to run for re-election. This resolution was soundly defeated by the delegates. However, 1 year later, in December of 1940, 200 local branches signed a petition calling for a referendum to bar any member from running for national office after they reached the age of 65. While this was going on, National Vice President Bill Gorman decided that he would oppose President Gaynor at the 1941 National Convention, and he asked Bill to support him in his bid for office, which Bill reluctantly agreed to, even though this caused a split between Bill and the old guard on the executive board. Internal pressure from the other members of the executive board caused Bill Gorman to drop his bid for presidency in January of 1941. So Bill took the courageous step to run against President Gaynor himself. On April 5, 1941, the final gavel fell on President Gaynor's term as national president, when the referendum passed by less than 3,000 votes, with 90% of the membership voting. At the 1941 National Convention in Los Angeles, Bill found himself as the only candidate for president, and on September 6, 1941, he became the 12th national president of the NALC and the second national president to be elected from Branch 43, Charles Cooten being the first in 1894. Bill's election as national president ended his 18-year career of delivering mail in Cincinnati. When Bill took office in September of 1941, he was greeted with two pieces of bad news. The National Union was on the brink of bankruptcy. Due to the money spent by the Gaynor administration to defeat the referendum, the NALC could not meet its financial obligations for the last quarter of the year. The new executive board unanimously agreed to forego their salaries and return to delivering mail until the crisis was over. While drafting a notice to the membership of what was to occur, the former longtime National Secretary Mike Finnan, who was forced to retire due to the new rules, loaned the NALC $25,000 to help avert the financial disaster. Bill was also informed by the American Federation of Labor that the NALC would have to vacate their offices because the AFL needed the office space for themselves. Bill was able to convince the AFL to allow the NALC to remain in their offices until 1948, when they moved to another building owned by the AFL. This experience helped convince Bill of the need for NALC to have their own building in which to house their offices. Bill's tenure as NALC National President ran from 1941 until 1962, and his term in office spanned the administrations of 4 U.S. presidents, from Franklin Roosevelt up to John F. Kennedy. When Bill took office in 1941, letter carriers had not had a pay raise since 1925, so his first order of business was raising the salaries of letter carriers across the country, and in 1943, the first of 10 pay raises was granted during Bill's tenure as NALC president. During Bill's time in office, the NALC made great strides in the labor movement to become the union that it is today. Among them was the equalization of pay for all letter carriers, regardless of the size office in which they worked in 1949. Bill also helped create the NALC Building Fund, which led to the construction of the NALC headquarters, completed in 1952. And when Bill wrote his book, Mailman USA, in 1960, all proceeds went to the NALC Building Fund. Bill also embraced MDA as the official charity of the NALC in 1952, and he started the Porchlight Brigades to raise money. Bill pushed to get the first law passed, granting letter carriers a uniform allotment in 1954. Bill was president during the revocation of the dual charter system in 1954 and the merger of all dual charter branches in 1960, ending segregation of NALC local branches. Bill was the driving force behind the resolution passed at the 1960 National Convention to establish Nowcrest as a retirement community for letter carriers. Bill was instrumental in getting President John Kennedy to issue Executive Order 10988 in 1962, which granted exclusive recognition to national unions to represent craft employees in the federal government. Bill also led the campaign in 1962 to grant exclusive right to the NALC to represent letter carriers on the workroom floor. Bill's hard work during this time laid the groundwork for collective bargaining that we enjoy today. In one of his final acts as president, Bill led the groundbreaking at Nowcrest in 1962. Bill retired as NALC National President on September 8, 1962 at the Denver Convention to become the first ambassador to Jamaica, a post that he was appointed to by President Kennedy. He was sworn in on October 24th of 1962, and he remained in the post until April of 1964. Bill returned back to the United States and moved into Nowcrest, where he spent the rest of his retirement. Bill remained an active part of the NALC through retirement, even singing Beautiful Ohio at the National Convention in 1984 in Las Vegas in an attempt to secure a bid for the 1988 convention.
Long, long ago, someone I know had a little red canoe, in it room for only two. Love found its start, then in my heart, and like a flower grew, drifting with the current down a moonlit stream, while above the heavens in their glory gleam, and the stars on high twinkle in the sky, seeming in a paradise of love divine, dreaming of a pair of eyes that looked in mine. Beautiful Ohio, in dreams again I see